The rain came down in sheets the night everything changed. I pressed myself against the brick wall of Luciano's, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Water streamed down my face, plastering my hair to my cheeks, soaking through the thin jacket I'd grabbed when I ran. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. Another call, another message. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Marcus had found my new number. Again, my hands shook as I reached for the employee entrance, fumbling with the keycard that granted access to the back corridor. The door beeped green and I stumbled inside, leaving a trail of water across the pristine tile floor. The kitchen was already in full dinner rush mode, the sound of sizzling pans and shouted orders creating a familiar chaos that somehow felt safer than the street outside. Sophie. Maria's voice cut through the noise. She stood at the expo station, her dark eyes widening as she took in my appearance. "What happened to you?" "I'm fine." The lie tasted metallic on my tongue. "Just got caught in the rain." "You look like you ran through a car wash." She grabbed a clean towel from the stack near the dishwashing station, pressing it into my hands. "Your shift doesn't start for another 20 minutes. Why are you here so early?" "Because I couldn't stay in my apartment. Because Marcus was standing outside my building again, despite the restraining order. Because the police had stopped taking my calls after the 5th time I'd reported him for violations they couldn't prove." If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. "Wanted to get a head start," I said, squeezing water from my hair with the towel. Big Saturday night crowd. Maria studied me with the particular intensity of someone who'd known me long enough to recognize when I was lying. We'd worked together at Luciano's for 3 months, ever since I'd fled San Diego with nothing but a backpack. I'd believed 2,000 miles would be enough. I'd been wrong. "Sophie," Maria's voice softened. "Is everything okay? Really okay?" Nothing was okay. Nothing had been okay since I'd told Marcus we were done 6 months ago. "I'm fine," I repeated. What else could I say? I changed into my uniform in the staff bathroom, hands still trembling as I tied the black apron around my waist. The mirror showed a woman I barely recognized anymore. At 27, I should have been finishing my master's degree in art history, working at a museum, building the career I'd dreamed about since childhood. Instead, I was waitressing at an upscale Italian restaurant in a city where I knew no one, hiding from a man who'd convinced himself that love meant ownership. The dining room at Luciano's was elegant in that understated way that screamed old money. Cream-colored walls, dark wood accents, tables set with pristine white linens and crystal that caught the light from chandeliers overhead. It catered to Chicago's elite businessmen closing deals over expensive wine, politicians celebrating victories, families marking anniversaries with 7-course meals, and apparently, men whose presence made the entire staff straighten their postures and lower their voices. "Table 12, Maria murmured as I joined her at the server station. "Don't stare, but that's Dante Moretti." I glanced across the dining room to where a man sat alone at a corner table, positioned with his back to the wall and clear sight lines to both entrances. He was striking in that dangerous way that made you look twice. Dark hair swept back from a face with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut glass. He wore a black suit that fit like it had been made specifically for his frame, which it probably had been. A gold watch gleamed at his wrist as he lifted a glass of red wine to his lips. But it was his eyes that caught my attention. Dark, assessing, constantly scanning the room with the kind of awareness that suggested he was cataloging every detail, every person, every potential threat. "Who is he?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew the answer wouldn't be simple. "Owns half the restaurants in this neighborhood. Some say other businesses too, the kind that don't advertise." Maria refilled water glasses with practiced efficiency. "He comes in 3 times a week, always sits at table 12, always orders the osso buco, always leaves a tip that's more than most people's rent. And the other thing people say about him?" Maria's expression grew carefully neutral, that it's better not to ask questions. I understood what she wasn't saying. Dante Moretti was connected, the kind of connected that came with power and protection, and the ability to make problems disappear in ways that didn't involve lawyers or police reports. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I pulled it out reflexively, and my blood turned to ice. "Marcus, I know you're working tonight. I just want to talk." 5 minutes, Sophie. That's all I'm asking." My hands started shaking again. I'd blocked this number yesterday. How did he keep getting new ones? How did he know where I worked? "Marcus, I'm outside. I can see the restaurant. Please come out and talk to me." Don't make me come in there. The phone slipped from my nerveless fingers, clattering against the marble floor. Several diners looked up at the noise, including the man at table 12. Those dark eyes found mine across the room, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite concern, but awareness, like he'd identified a problem that required his attention. Sophie? Maria bent to retrieve my phone, then went very still as she read the messages on the screen. Oh my God, is this... I need to call the police. My voice sounded distant, hollow. He's violating the restraining order. They have to do something this time. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. The police would come, eventually. They'd talk to Marcus, who would smile and apologize and claim he was just passing by. They'd remind him about the restraining order, and he'd nod and promise to stay away. And then tomorrow, or the next day, he'd be back. Because that's how it always went. Because pieces of paper didn't actually protect anyone from men who decided that no meant nothing. I looked toward the front entrance, and my heart stopped. Marcus stood on the other side of the glass doors, rain dripping from his jacket, eyes locked on mine. He raised one hand, pressed it against the window, waiting. A smile touched his lips. The same smile that had once made me feel special and now made bile rise in my throat. I'm calling the police, Maria said, already pulling out her own phone. He'll leave before they get here. He always does. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. I don't know, I whispered, watching Marcus through the window with that patient, determined look I'd come to dread. That's when Marcus pulled open the door and walked inside. The hostess station at Luciano's was designed to be a barrier, an elegant checkpoint where reservations were verified and guests were vetted before being allowed into the dining room. Marcus walked past it like it didn't exist. Sir, the hostess called after him, her voice carrying that particular blend of politeness and authority. Sir, do you have a reservation? He ignored her completely, his eyes scanning the restaurant until they found me standing frozen near the server station. His hair was wet from the rain, plastered to his forehead in a way that made him look younger than 32. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt that I recognized from when we'd lived together, back when I'd still thought his intensity was passion instead of obsession. Sophie. My name carried across the dining room, drawing attention from diners who'd been absorbed in their meals. We need to talk. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But where? The kitchen had a back exit, but Marcus knew about back exits. He'd waited by one in San Diego for 4 hours once, patient as a predator. My apartment wasn't safe, he'd already proven that. And the police. The police would do nothing until he actually hurt me, and by then it would be too late. Sir. The hostess had abandoned her post, following Marcus into the dining room with growing alarm. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. If you don't have a reservation, I'm not here to eat. Marcus took another step toward me, and I backed up involuntarily. I'm here to talk to my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, I managed, hating how my voice shook. We're not together anymore, Marcus. You need to leave. We're not done, Sophie. You don't get to just decide that unilaterally. He used that same reasonable tone he always did, the one that made me sound crazy when I tried to explain to people why I was afraid. Relationships require communication. You can't just run away every time things get difficult. I didn't run away. I left. There's a difference. You disappeared in the middle of the night without even giving me a chance to fix things. His voice rose slightly, that edge of desperation creeping in. You changed your number. You moved to a different city. You got a restraining order based on lies. And now you won't even give me 5 minutes to explain. Explain what? The anger surprised me, cutting through the fear. That you tracked my phone? That you showed up at my work in San Diego so many times I got fired? That you called my mother pretending to be from the hospital to find out where I'd gone? Something flickered across his face. Not guilt. Never guilt. Just irritation that I was making this harder than it needed to be. I was worried about you, he said. When someone you love disappears, you do whatever it takes to make sure they're safe. I'm safe from you. That's the whole point. Sir. A new voice entered the conversation, male, carrying quiet authority. The lady has asked you to leave. I suggest you do so. I looked up to find Dante Moretti standing 3 tables away, having risen from his corner position with the fluid grace of someone who'd made these kinds of interventions before. Up close, he was even more striking tall, probably 6'2", with the kind of presence that made other men instinctively defer. Marcus barely glanced at him. This is a private conversation. You're having it in a public restaurant. That makes it everyone's concern. Dante took a single step forward, and somehow that small movement carried more threat than anything I'd ever seen, particularly mine, since I have a substantial investment in ensuring this establishment maintains its reputation for being a safe, comfortable environment for all guests and staff. The way he said it calm, almost pleasant, made it clear he wasn't talking about Yelp reviews. Marcus finally turned to fully face him, and I watched the calculation happen in his eyes. Watched him assess Dante the same way he'd assessed every obstacle I'd tried to put between us. Watched him decide whether this was worth the confrontation. "Who are you?" Marcus asked. "Her new boyfriend. Is that what this is about? You left me for some, I'm the person telling you to leave." Dante's voice never rose, never lost that controlled courtesy. "You can walk out on your own, or my security can assist you. Your choice, but you're choosing in the next 10 seconds. My phone buzzed again. I didn't need to look to know Marcus had sent another message, probably something about how I was embarrassing him, about how we'd discuss this later, about how this wasn't over. It was never over. That was the problem. No matter how many times I said no, no matter how many miles I put between us, no matter how many legal orders I obtained, Marcus never accepted that it was over. "Fine." Marcus held up his hands in mock surrender, that familiar, martyred expression settling over his features. "I'll leave. But Sophie, this conversation isn't finished. You can't avoid me forever." He walked toward the entrance with deliberate slowness, making sure everyone understood he was leaving by choice, not because he was afraid. As he passed the hostess station, he turned back one more time. "I'll wait for your shift to end," he called out, loud enough for the entire dining room to hear. "We can talk then, like adults." The door closed behind him, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. My legs felt suddenly weak, unstable. The dining room buzzed with the awkward energy of people who'd witnessed something uncomfortable and wanted to return to the illusion that their elegant evening hadn't been disrupted. "Are you all right?" Dante asked, and I looked up to find him standing much closer than I'd realized. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that mixed with the faint scent of the red wine he'd been drinking. "I'm fine." The automatic lie, the one I'd been telling for months. His dark eyes studied my face with unsettling intensity, like he could see through the lie to the terror underneath. "No, you're not." Something about the flat certainty in his voice cracked the careful composure I'd been maintaining. To my absolute horror, tears started burning behind my eyes. "I'm sorry," I managed, blinking rapidly. "I'm so sorry about that disruption. It won't happen again. I'll talk to my manager, make sure—" "Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight?" he interrupted. "When your shift ends?" The question caught me off guard. Not will he bother you again, or have you called the police, the useless questions everyone always asked. Just a simple, practical inquiry about whether I had actual safety waiting for me. My apartment. Though even saying it made my stomach clench with anxiety. Marcus knew where I lived. He'd proven that yesterday. Dante pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then looked back at me. "What time does your shift end?" "Midnight. You'll have a driver waiting for you at the staff entrance. He'll take you wherever you need to go." I stared at him, trying to process the offer. "I can't accept that. I don't even know you. You know I just got your stalker ex-boyfriend to leave without calling the police." A slight smile touched his lips. "That's more than most strangers would do. Why are you helping me?" For a long moment, he didn't answer, and I wondered if I'd overstepped somehow, asked a question I wasn't supposed to ask. Then his expression shifted, something almost vulnerable flickering across his features before the control returned. "Because I know what it's like to watch someone you care about live in fear," he said quietly, "and I know what it costs to feel powerless against it." Before I could respond, he returned to table 12, settling back into his corner position like the entire incident had been a minor interruption to his evening. But I noticed he angled his chair differently now, positioning himself where he could see not just the entrances, but the staff entrance too, where he could watch me move through my shift. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of automatic movements, taking orders, delivering plates, refilling wine glasses, but I was hyper-aware of Dante at table 12, of the way his eyes occasionally tracked my movements across the dining room, not in the invasive way Marcus watched me, with that possessive calculation. This was different, protective, assessing. When he finally left around 10:30, he stopped by the server station where I was organizing checks for my remaining tables. "Marco will be outside at midnight," he said, pulling out his wallet and extracting several crisp $100 bills. "White SUV, License plate starts with 7XR. He'll take you home and make sure you get inside safely. Mr. Moretti, I really can't. Yes, you can. He placed the money on the counter, far more than his bill required. And it's Dante. Mr. Moretti makes me feel like my father. Then he was gone, moving through the dining room with that same controlled grace. Two men in dark suits materializing from corners. I hadn't noticed them occupying to fall into formation around him. Maria appeared at my elbow the moment he left. Did Dante Moretti just offer you a private security detail? I think so. My voice came out uncertain. Is that something he does? Sophie, Dante Moretti doesn't do anything without a reason. She lowered her voice, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Whatever just happened, you're under his protection now. That's not nothing in this city. I looked toward the entrance where Marcus had stood hours earlier, then down at the money Dante had left. Protection. Real protection. Not just pieces of paper that criminals ignored. For the first time in 6 months, something that might have been hope flickered in my chest. But I wasn't naive enough to believe it would be that simple. Nothing ever was when it came to Marcus. And something told me accepting help from a man like Dante Moretti would come with complications I couldn't begin to predict. At 11:45, I changed out of my uniform in the staff bathroom, my hands still shaking slightly as I pulled on jeans and the jacket that had finally dried from the earlier rain. My phone sat silent in my purse. I'd turned it off after the 10th message from Marcus, unable to handle the constant buzzing of his escalating demands. We need to talk. You're being unreasonable. I'm trying to be patient, Sophie, but you're testing me. Answer your phone. I know you're reading these. Fine. I'll wait all night if I have to. The last message had come at 10:47. Over an hour ago. Maybe he'd finally given up and gone home. Maybe this time would be different. I knew better than to believe it. Maria walked me to the staff entrance, her presence a small comfort against, the anxiety crawling up my spine. You sure about this? She asked. I can call you an Uber. Have them meet you at the front. There's supposed to be a car waiting. I pushed open the heavy door, cold November air hitting my face. The alley behind Luciano's was poorly lit, shadows pooling between dumpsters and delivery trucks. For a moment, I saw nothing but darkness. Then headlights flashed once. A white SUV sat idling 20 feet away, exactly where Dante said it would be. The rear door opened, and a man stepped out broad-shouldered, probably in his 40s, with the kind of alert posture that suggested military or law enforcement background. Sophie Mitchell? He called out. I'm Marco. Mr. Moretti asked me to see you home safely. Relief flooded through me so intensely my knees almost buckled. Thank you. My apartment is Sophie. Marcus's voice cut through the night like a blade. He emerged from behind a delivery truck 15 feet away, and I realized with sickening clarity that he'd been waiting in the shadows the entire time. Watching, patient, knowing I'd have to leave eventually. Get in the car, Marco said quietly, moving between Marcus and me with practiced efficiency. Now. But I was frozen, watching Marcus approach with that same determined expression I'd seen 100 times before. The one that said he'd made a decision and nothing would change his mind. The one that had preceded every boundary violation, every ignored request for space, every escalation that had brought us to this moment. We need to talk, Marcus said, as if Marco didn't exist, as if we were alone in the alley and he had every right to demand my attention. 5 minutes, Sophie. That's all I'm asking. The lady doesn't want to talk to you. Marco's voice carried the flat authority of someone who'd had these conversations before. You need to leave. Now. Who the hell are you? Marcus finally acknowledged him, irritation flickering across his face. Her bodyguard? You think you can keep me from talking to my girlfriend? Ex-girlfriend, I managed, finding my voice. Marcus, there's a restraining order. You're not supposed to be within 100 yards of me. That's bullshit and you know it. You lied to get that order. Made me sound dangerous when I've never done anything except love you. His voice rose, taking on that edge of desperation I'd learned to fear. I crossed the entire country to find you. I deserve at least a conversation. You're not going to get one. Marco took another step forward, his hand moving to his jacket in a gesture that made Marcus finally hesitate. Last warning. Leave now, or this becomes a police matter. Fine. Marcus held up his hands, but his eyes never left mine. But I'm not giving up, Sophie. I'll never give up. You understand that? No matter where you go, no matter who you hire to protect you, I'll find you, because that's what love means. It means not giving up. He backed away slowly, maintaining eye contact, until he disappeared around the corner of the building. I stood there shaking, Marco's solid presence beside me the only thing keeping me upright. Miss Mitchell. His voice was gentle now, concerned. We need to get you somewhere safe. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Let him guide me to the SUV's open door. The interior smelled like leather and some kind of air freshener that was probably more expensive than my monthly rent. As Marco pulled away from the curb, I looked back to see Marcus standing at the mouth of the alley, illuminated by a streetlight, watching the car disappear into traffic. He wasn't giving up. He'd said it himself. And the terrifying thing was, I believed him. My apartment building looked different when we arrived, more vulnerable somehow. The security door that never quite latched properly, the lobby with its broken camera, the stairs with burnt-out lights on every other landing. Marcus would have no trouble getting inside. He'd proven that yesterday, when I'd found him waiting outside my door with flowers and apologies, and that look in his eyes that said he'd convinced himself this was romantic instead of terrifying. I'll walk you up, Marco said, already out of the car. You don't have to, mister. Moretti was very clear about my instructions. We climbed 3 flights in silence, my keys already in my hand as we approached 3C. The hallway was empty, no signs of Marcus lurking in shadows. Maybe for once, he'd actually listened. Maybe the presence of Marco and the implicit threat of Dante Moretti's involvement had been enough to make him reconsider. I was unlocking my door when Marco's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then at me. Mr. Moretti would like to speak with you, he said, holding out the phone. I took it with trembling hands. Hello? Are you safe? Dante's voice carried the same controlled concern I'd heard in the restaurant. I'm at my apartment. Marcus was waiting in the alley, but Marco, he handled it. Marcus won't stop. Not a question, an observation. Men like that don't accept loss. They reframe it as a temporary setback. The accuracy of that assessment made my chest tight. I know. Do you have somewhere else you can stay? Family? Friends? Not in Chicago. I only moved here 3 months ago. Silence stretched between us, and I could almost hear him thinking, calculating options. Pack a bag, he finally said. Enough for a few days. Marco will bring you somewhere safe while we deal with this situation. Deal with it how? By making it clear to Marcus that continuing to pursue you will have consequences he won't enjoy. The implications of that statement should have frightened me, should have made me decline politely and handle this through proper legal channels. But I was so tired of being afraid, so tired of restraining orders that didn't protect, of police who couldn't help until after I was hurt, of trying to stay one step ahead of someone who was always watching. Okay, I whispered. Give me 15 minutes. The safe house was a penthouse apartment in a building I couldn't afford to walk past, let alone live in. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, the water reflecting city lights like scattered diamonds. Everything was clean lines and expensive taste, leather furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than my annual salary, a kitchen with appliances I didn't know how to operate. Marco set my hastily packed duffel bag near the door with careful precision. Mr. Moretti will be here within the hour. Make yourself comfortable. The kitchen is fully stocked, and there are fresh towels in the guest bathroom. How long am I staying here? The question came out smaller than I intended. Until the situation is resolved. His expression softened slightly. You're safe here, Miss Mitchell. This building has security that would make Fort Knox jealous. He left, and I stood in the center of the living room feeling displaced, like I'd been picked up by a tornado and set down in someone else's life. Through the windows, Chicago sprawled in every direction, massive and indifferent to my small problems. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I'd turned it back on during the car ride, a mistake I immediately regretted. Marcus, I saw you leave with that man. Who is he, Sophie? Your new boyfriend? Is that why you're doing this? Marcus, you're making a mistake. Whatever he told you, whatever he promised, he doesn't care about you like I do. Marcus, I'm not leaving Chicago until we talk. I'll camp outside your building if I have to. Marcus, answer me. Marcus, answer me. 23 messages in the 40 minutes since I'd left my apartment. I watched them accumulate with the detached numbness that came from months of this treatment. The escalation from reasonable to desperate to angry, all in the span of a few texts. The way he could convince himself that this behavior was love instead of harassment. I blocked the number. Again. knowing he'd find another one. He always did. The exhaustion hit me all at once, physical, emotional, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from constantly operating in survival mode. I found the guest room Marco had mentioned, a space decorated in soothing grays and blues with a bed that looked like something from a luxury hotel. I sat on the edge of it, still wearing my jacket, unable to quite believe this was real. 45 minutes later, I heard the front door open. Male voices in the living room, too low to make out words. I should have stayed in the guest room, given Dante privacy to conduct whatever business had brought him here. Instead, I found myself drawn to the doorway, watching him shrug out of a charcoal suit jacket and drape it over the back of a chair with tired precision. He'd loosened his tie, rolled up his shirt sleeves, and something about the casual intimacy of those gestures made him seem more human, less like the dangerous figure who'd intervened at the restaurant and more like someone who'd had a long day. "You should be resting," he said without turning around, like he'd known I was there. Couldn't sleep. I stepped into the living room, maintaining distance. "I don't know how to thank you for this. The car, the apartment, helping at the restaurant, you don't need to thank me." He poured 2 glasses of what looked like expensive scotch from a crystal decanter, then held one out to me. "You need to tell me everything about Marcus so I can determine how to handle him." I took the glass, the weight of it solid in my hand. "Handle him how?" "That depends on what kind of threat he represents." Dante settled onto the leather sofa with the same controlled grace I'd noticed in the restaurant. "Sit. Tell me the story from the beginning." So I did. I told him about meeting Marcus 3 years ago at an art gallery opening in San Diego, how he'd seemed charming and attentive in ways that made me feel special, how that attention had gradually transformed into surveillance, how he'd wanted to know where I was every moment, who I was talking to, what I was doing, how he'd isolated me from friends and family with such careful manipulation that I hadn't realized what was happening until it was almost too late. I told him about the night I'd finally ended it, 8 months ago, about how Marcus had refused to accept it, showing up at my apartment, my job, my mother's house, about the restraining order I'd gotten that he violated constantly, about the 4 different phone numbers I'd gone through, each one compromised within weeks, about fleeing to Chicago 3 months ago, believing distance would be enough. "He found me within 6 weeks, I said, staring into the amber liquid in my glass. "I don't know how. I didn't tell anyone where I was going except my mother, and she swore she didn't say anything. But suddenly he was calling from a Chicago area code, sending flowers to Luciano's, leaving notes on my apartment door. Phone tracking," Dante said immediately. "He's probably installed spyware on your device at some point. Every time you get a new number, he can still see your location, your contacts, your messages." The realization made my stomach drop. How do I stop that? New phone. Completely new. Not a transfer of data from the old one. He pulled out his own phone, typed something quickly. "I'll have one delivered tomorrow with a number that's not connected to any of your previous accounts." I wanted to argue, to insist I could handle this myself. But the truth was, I'd been handling it myself for 8 months, and Marcus was still finding me, still violating every boundary I tried to establish, still convinced that his obsession was love, and I was the one being unreasonable. "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly. "You don't know me. This isn't your problem." Dante was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying me with that same unsettling intensity I'd noticed in the restaurant. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested he was sharing something he rarely discussed. "My sister had a boyfriend like Marcus," he said. "Controlling, obsessive, convinced that love justified any behavior. She tried to leave him 5 times. 5 times, she came back because he convinced her that no one else would care about her the way he did, that she was overreacting, that his jealousy just meant he loved her so much." His jaw tightened, barely perceptible, but there. The 6th time she tried to leave, he killed her, made it look like a suicide, and the police bought it because she'd been emotionally unstable, because she'd called them so many times about violations that they stopped taking her seriously. The confession hung in the air between they hurt, but us, heavy with grief and rage that time hadn't diminished. I thought about my own calls to the police, the way the responding officers had grown increasingly skeptical with each report, the implication that I was exaggerating, being dramatic, that Marcus seemed like such a nice guy, and maybe I was the problem. "I'm sorry," I whispered, inadequate but all I had. I was 20 when it happened, too young to protect her, too powerless against a system that treated her fear as paranoia. He drained his scotch in one swallow. I swore I'd never be powerless again, and I swore that if I ever encountered another situation like hers, I'd do whatever it took to stop it. Understanding dawned. That's why you intervened tonight. That's why I'm going to make sure Marcus understands that pursuing you further will have consequences he won't survive. The certainty in his voice should have frightened me, should have made me question what kind of man I'd accepted help from. But all I felt was a dark, guilty relief. Someone finally believed me. Someone finally understood that pieces of paper and police reports weren't going to stop Marcus. Someone was willing to do what was necessary to make me safe. What happens now? I asked. Now, you stay here where Marcus can't find you. The building has security that would make the Secret Service jealous. Biometric access, armed guards, surveillance on every floor. Your new phone arrives tomorrow with a number he can't trace, and Marco will be stationed outside this apartment 24 hours a day until we're certain there's no threat. And Marcus? Dante's smile was cold, sharp as a blade. Marcus is about to learn that some women are under protection he can't cross. Some boundaries come with consequences that make restraining orders look like suggestions. I should have asked what those consequences meant. Should have insisted on knowing exactly what Dante planned to do. But I was so tired of being afraid, so exhausted from months of looking over my shoulder, that I let myself sink into the comfort of having someone else handle it. Someone who had the power and resources to actually make a difference. There's something else you need to understand, Dante said, his voice gentler now. Once you accept my protection, you become part of my world. People will make assumptions about our relationship, about what you mean to me. That attention comes with its own risks. Worse than Marcus? Different. Marcus is obsessed with possession. My world operates on different rules, different dangers. He stood, moving to refill his glass. But I give you my word that as long as you're under my protection, no one will harm you, including Marcus, especially Marcus. I thought about my apartment with its broken security door, about the restraining order that hadn't stopped Marcus from showing up at my work, about 8 months of escalating fear and the growing certainty that this would only end when Marcus decided it was over or when one of us was dead. Okay, I said. I accept your protection. Something shifted in Dante's expression, satisfaction mixed with something I couldn't quite identify. Then, you should rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss longer-term arrangements and how to handle the practical aspects of your situation. Your job, your belongings, the life you'll need to build while Marcus is being dealt with. He was right. I was exhausted, running on adrenaline and fear that was finally draining away in this secure space. But as I stood to head to the guest room, one more question occurred to me. Your sister, I said quietly. What was her name? Isabella. The grief in his voice was old but not healed. She was 23. She wanted to be a teacher. I'm sorry she didn't have someone like you to protect her. I'm sorry I was too late to be that person. He turned to look at me fully, those dark eyes reflecting pain he'd learned to carry. But I won't be too late for you, Sophie. That's a promise. I believed him. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe accepting help from a man whose world operated outside legal boundaries was its own form of danger. But as I lay in the guest, the room's expensive sheets, listening to the muted sounds of the city far below, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Safe. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of fresh coffee. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then yesterday crashed back Marcus at the restaurant, Dante's intervention, this penthouse sanctuary that felt like something from a dream. The clock on the nightstand read 9:47 a.m. I'd slept almost 10 hours, the first uninterrupted sleep I'd had in weeks. No nightmares about Marcus breaking down my door. No jolting awake at every sound in the hallway. Just deep, exhausted sleep in a bed that probably cost more than my car. I found Dante in the kitchen, dressed more casually than yesterday in dark jeans and a black sweater, reading something on his tablet while drinking espresso from a tiny cup. He looked up when I entered, assessing my appearance with that same careful attention. There's coffee, he said, gesturing to a machine that looked like it required an engineering degree to operate. Or I can make you something if you prefer. Coffee's fine. I managed to figure out the machine, filling a mug with liquid that smelled better than anything I'd ever made in my own kitchen. Thank you for letting me sleep in. I should probably call Maria, let her know I'm okay. Already handled. I spoke with the restaurant manager this morning. You're taking a week of personal leave, fully paid. I stared at him. How did you own Luciano's, don't you? I own several restaurants in this neighborhood. Luciano's is one of them. He set down his tablet. Which means your employment is secure and your schedule is flexible while we deal with your situation. The casual revelation that my boss was actually my protector made me reassess everything I thought I knew about the past 8 months. How long have you been aware of me? Since your second week at Luciano's, Maria mentioned you'd relocated from San Diego, seemed nervous, jumped at loud noises. His expression remained neutral, but I caught something underneath. I noticed patterns, Sophie, and you were displaying classic signs of trauma and hypervigilance. So you've been watching me. The words came out more accusing than I intended. I've been aware of a potential situation involving one of my employees. There's a difference. He stood, moving to refill his espresso with precise movements. When your ex-boyfriend appeared last night, it confirmed what I'd suspected, that you were running from something, someone, and that simply running wasn't going to be enough. I should have been disturbed by the admission that he'd been observing me for months, should have questioned the kind of man who kept that level of surveillance on his staff, but I was too focused on the relief of finally having someone who understood the scope of the problem. What happens now? I asked. With Marcus, I mean. Now we send him a message about boundaries and consequences. Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, something dark, flickering across his features. Speaking of which, he's currently at Luciano's demanding to speak with the manager about your whereabouts. My stomach clenched. He'll make a scene. Get them to tell him where I am. He'll get nothing except an education in why harassing people connected to my organization is a poor life choice. Dante typed something quickly, then pocketed his phone. Marco is handling it. I tried to imagine what handling it meant in Dante's world, tried to picture Marco, with his military bearing and careful professionalism, confronting Marcus in the middle of a lunch rush. Will he hurt him? Not unless Marcus makes it necessary. Dante studied my face, reading something in my expression. Does that bother you? The possibility that your ex-boyfriend might face actual consequences for his behavior? It should have. I should have been horrified at the thought of violence, even directed at someone who'd made my life a nightmare. But all I felt was a dark satisfaction that Marcus might finally understand what it felt like to be afraid. No, I admitted quietly. Is that terrible? It's human. You've spent 8 months being terrorized by someone the legal system couldn't or wouldn't stop. Wanting him to experience consequences doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you someone who's learned that sometimes justice exists outside courtrooms. The doorbell chimed, an elegant sound that probably cost more than a normal doorbell. Dante moved to answer it, returning with a sleek box that he set on the kitchen counter. Your new phone, he said, opening it to reveal the latest model iPhone. Clean device, new number, registered to one of my business entities. Marcus will have no way to trace it or access your information. I picked it up, the weight of it solid and real in my hand. A lifeline to the outside world that Marcus couldn't compromise. Thank you. I'll pay you back. This isn't a loan, Sophie. It's protection. His voice carried that same gentle firmness I'd noticed yesterday. I don't want your money. I want you safe. Why? The question burst out before I could stop it. I understand about your sister, about not wanting to be powerless. But the apartment, the phone, the security detail, this is more than just preventing a tragedy. You don't even know me. Dante was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying me with uncomfortable intensity. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a vulnerability I hadn't expected. Do you believe in instinct, Sophie? That moment when you meet someone and simply know they matter, even if you can't explain why? My breath caught. I don't know. I do. Because the first time I saw you at Luciano's, serving tables with that careful smile that didn't reach your eyes, I knew. He took a step closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his dark irises. I knew you were running from something. I knew you were stronger than you believed, and I knew that if I ever had the chance to help you, I would take it. The admission hung in the air between us, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to examine. This wasn't just about his sister anymore. Wasn't just about a powerful man preventing another tragedy. This was personal in ways that both terrified and intrigued me. Dante, my new phone buzzed, interrupting whatever I'd been about to say. I looked down at the screen, confused. Only one person had this number, and he was standing right in front of me. Then I saw the text, and my blood turned to ice. Unknown. Nice try with the new phone. But I'll always find you, Sophie. You can't hide from me. Not with new numbers, not with bodyguards, not with whoever you think is protecting you. We're meant to be together. Nothing will change that. The phone slipped from my nerveless fingers. Dante caught it before it hit the floor, his expression darkening as he read the message. That's impossible, I whispered. You said this number was secure, that he couldn't trace it. He can't. Dante's voice was tight with controlled fury, which means he didn't trace it. Someone gave it to him. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The implications crashed over me like a wave. Someone in Dante's organization, someone with access to information that should have been secure, had betrayed us, had given Marcus the one thing that would let him continue his harassment despite all the protection Dante had put in place. Who? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. That's what I'm going to find out. Dante was already moving, pulling out his own phone and speaking rapidly in Italian. The language was beautiful and harsh at once, his tone making it clear that someone was about to face serious consequences. He hung up, turned back to me with an expression that was equal parts fury and concern. Pack your things. We're moving you to a different location until I can determine how Marcus got this information. Where? My personal residence. Not a safe house. Not a property connected to my business operations. Somewhere only a handful of people know about. He was already gathering my duffel bag from where I'd left it by the guest room door. Somewhere Marcus and whoever's helping him will never think to look. I should have protested. Should have insisted that I couldn't keep imposing. That this was too much. That surely there was another solution. But the text message had shattered the fragile sense of security I'd built overnight. Marcus was still out there, still hunting me, and now he had help from someone inside Dante's organization. Okay, I said, my voice smaller than I wanted. Let's go. As we rode the private elevator down to the parking garage, Dante's hand found the small of my back, a gesture that should have felt presumptuous but somehow just felt protective. Grounding. Sophie, he said quietly as we approached a black sedan with tinted windows. I'm going to find whoever leaked your information. And when I do, they're going to wish they'd made different choices. But more importantly, I'm going to make sure Marcus understands that pursuing you further will cost him more than he's willing to pay. I looked up at him. This dangerous man who'd inserted himself into my nightmare and offered protection I desperately needed. What if he doesn't care about the cost? What if he's too obsessed to stop? Dante's smile was cold, predatory. Then I'll make the cost high enough that he has no choice but to care. Or I'll make sure he can never threaten you again. One way or another, this ends. Soon. As we pulled out of the garage into Chicago's midday traffic, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure across the street. Marcus, standing on the corner, phone pressed to his ear, scanning the buildings with determined focus. He hadn't seen us, but I'd seen him, and the message was clear. He wasn't giving up. He was here, hunting, waiting for any opportunity to force the confrontation he believed we needed to have. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I had someone willing to hunt back. Dante's personal residence was a converted warehouse in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. All exposed brick and industrial windows transformed into something that felt more like an art gallery than a home. Security was subtle but omnipresent cameras hidden in architectural details, reinforced doors disguised as vintage originals, bulletproof glass that looked like regular windows. "This is where you live?" I asked as he led me through spaces that managed to feel both vast and intimate. "When I'm not traveling for business." He set my bag down in a guest suite that was larger than my entire apartment. The building is secured by a private system that only 4 people have access to. My head of security, my second in command, my sister's daughter, and me. The mention of his sister sent a pang through my chest. "You have a niece?" "Gabriella. She's 15, lives with her maternal grandparents in Boston." Something softened in his expression. "She doesn't know the details of how her mother died, thinks it was actually suicide. I've let her believe that because the truth would destroy her. Does she know what you do? Your business?" "She knows I'm in hospitality and real estate," which is true, technically. He moved to the windows, looking out over the city with the same careful vigilance I'd noticed in the restaurant. "The other aspects of my work, she doesn't need to know about. Not yet. Maybe not ever." I was beginning to understand the layers of Dante Moretti's world, the legitimate businesses that provided cover and income, the less legitimate operations that gave him power and influence. the careful balance between protection and violence, between the law and justice that existed outside it. What happens now? I asked, the question becoming a refrain, because I genuinely didn't know what came next, how long I'd be hiding, what dealing with Marcus actually meant. Now, I make some calls. Dante pulled out his phone, then hesitated. Sophie, what I'm about to do, the methods I'll use to find out who betrayed your location and to convince Marcus to leave Chicago, they exist outside legal boundaries. If that bothers you, if you'd rather I handle this through official channels, say so now. I thought about 8 months of police reports and restraining orders that changed nothing. I don't want official channels, I said quietly. I want Marcus gone. Something flickered in Dante's eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, or recognition, like I'd passed some kind of test. Then make yourself comfortable. This might take a few hours. He disappeared into what looked like a home office, the door closing behind him with quiet finality. I stood in the center of the guest suite, surrounded by luxury I'd never expected to experience, protected by a man whose world operated by rules I was only beginning to understand. My new phone buzzed. Another message from Marcus. Unknown. I know you're with him. Whoever he is. Whatever he promised you. But Sophie, we both know you'll come back to me eventually. You always do. Because no one else will ever love you the way I do. No one else will ever understand you. The words were designed to burrow into my brain, to make me doubt myself, to reinforce the narrative Marcus had built over 3 years of manipulation. That his obsession was love. That leaving him meant giving up the only person who truly cared. I deleted the message without responding. Blocked the number, knowing he'd find another one, but refusing to engage with the psychological warfare he'd perfected. Through the closed office door, I could hear Dante's voice, speaking rapid Italian punctuated by long silences. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. Controlled fury, absolute authority, the sound of someone issuing orders that would be followed without question. An hour passed, then another. I explored the warehouse apartment, finding a kitchen that was actually equipped for cooking, unlike the sterile perfection of the safe house. A library with walls of books in multiple languages. A rooftop terrace with views of the city that made me feel both exposed and untouchable. When Dante finally emerged from his office, something had changed in his bearing. Still controlled, still dangerous, but with an edge of dark satisfaction. I found the leak, he said without preamble. One of the hostesses at Luciano's. Marcus approached her yesterday afternoon, offered her $5,000 for any information about your whereabouts and contact information. She accessed the employee database where Maria had logged your emergency contact details after you started working there. Betrayed by someone I'd worked alongside for months. Someone who'd smiled at me during pre-shift meetings and complained about difficult customers. Someone who'd sold my safety for the price of a used car. What happens to her? I asked. She's been terminated. And she's been made aware that if she has any further contact with Marcus, or shares any additional information about you, there will be consequences that extend beyond losing her job. The implication was clear. Dante's reach extended far beyond employment decisions, but I found I didn't care about the ethics of it. Didn't care if threats and intimidation fell outside acceptable behavior. I cared about being safe. And Marcus is currently being invited to a conversation about his future choices. Dante checked his watch, a gesture that suggested precise timing. Marco and 2 of my associates are collecting him from the coffee, a shop where he's been sitting for the past 3 hours, watching Luciano's entrance and waiting for you to appear. My stomach clenched. What kind of conversation? The kind where we make it clear that continuing to pursue you will have costs he's not prepared to pay. Physical, financial, legal, whatever language Marcus speaks most fluently, that's the language we'll use. I should have been horrified. Should have protested that violence wouldn't solve anything, that Marcus needed psychological help, not physical threats. But 8 months of fear had burned away any idealism about what would actually stop him. Will it work? I asked. Or will it just make him angrier? That depends on Marcus. If he's capable of rational self-interest, if his survival instinct is stronger than his obsession, then yes, he'll leave Chicago and never contact you again. Dante's expression darkened. If not, if he's so far gone that even facing real consequences won't deter him, then we'll take more permanent measures. I mean, I'll do whatever is necessary to ensure you're safe. He crossed the distance between us, his hand coming up to cut my face with surprising gentleness. I won't lose another woman to this, not you. The touch sent electricity through me, made me hyper-aware of his proximity, his scent, the heat radiating from his body. This was more than protection, more than a powerful man preventing a tragedy. This was personal, intimate, charged with something I wasn't ready to name. "Dante," I whispered, not sure what I was asking. His thumb traced my cheekbone, dark eyes searching my face. "You're safe here, Sophie. With me. I promise you that." Then his phone rang, shattering the moment. He stepped back, creating distance as he answered in Italian. The conversation was brief, his expression carefully neutral as he listened. When he hung up, something had shifted. Not quite concern, but calculation. "Marcus agreed to the conversation," he said. "He's being brought to a location where we can discuss his options privately. Do you want to be there? To tell him yourself that it's over? That he needs to leave Chicago and never contact you again?" Every instinct screamed no. The thought of seeing Marcus again, of giving him another opportunity to work his psychological manipulation, made my skin crawl. But another part of me, the part that had been running for 8 months, the part that was tired of being afraid, wanted to face him, wanted to look him in the eye and make it clear that his power over me was gone. "Yes," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I want to be there." Dante studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we leave in 30 minutes. And Sophie, whatever happens in that room, whatever you see or hear, know that everything I do is to protect you. Can you trust me with that?" I thought about his sister Isabella, about the grief and rage that had shaped him into someone who operated outside normal boundaries, about the promise he'd made to never be powerless again, about the way he'd looked at me in the restaurant, in the safe house, here in his personal space, like I mattered in ways that went beyond preventing a tragedy. "Yes," I said, "I trust you." His smile was sharp and dark, and somehow made me feel safer than any restraining order ever had. "Then let's go introduce Marcus to the consequences of his choices." The warehouse district looked different at night. Industrial buildings loomed like sleeping giants, their broken windows reflecting streetlights in fractured patterns. Our car pulled into a loading dock behind a structure that had clearly been abandoned for years, rust eating through metal doors and graffiti covering every available surface. But the interior told a different story. Someone had converted part of the warehouse into a functional space, concrete floors that had been swept clean, industrial lighting that worked despite the building's derelict exterior, and a chair. Sitting in the center of the open floor like a throne in a kingdom of shadows, Marcus sat in that chair. His hands were zip-tied to the armrests, though not tightly enough to cut off circulation. His face was unmarked, no signs of violence, but his eyes carried the wide-eyed panic of someone who'd just realized the world operated by rules he didn't understand. Marco stood behind him, arms crossed, looking like a statue carved from granite and menace. 2 other men flanked the space, both wearing dark suits, both radiating the same controlled danger as Dante. This wasn't a random assault. This was a calculated demonstration of power. "Sophie." Marcus's voice cracked when he saw me, relief and desperation warring in his expression. "Thank God. Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them we're together, that this is just a misunderstanding between us." I stood next to Dante, his presence solid and grounding beside me. For the first time, I was the one with power. "We're not together," I said. "We haven't been for 8 months. You just refused to accept it." "That's not Sophie. We had a fight. Couples fight. That doesn't mean you get to run across the country and file false restraining orders and act like 3 years meant nothing." The audacity of the reframing stole my breath. He genuinely believed his own narrative. I believed that tracking my phone, showing up at my job, harassing my mother, violating court orders, all of that was just normal relationship conflict that I was overreacting to. "I didn't file anything false," I said, finding my anger beneath the fear. "You violated every boundary I set. You showed up at my apartment in San Diego 47 times after I moved out. You called my work so many times I got fired. You found my mother's address and went to her house pretending to be from the hospital to get information about where I'd gone. Because I was worried about you." His voice rose, that familiar edge of desperation creeping in. "You disappeared in the middle of the night. What was I supposed to think? I love you, Sophie. Everything I did was because I love you." "That's not love," Dante said. "Love respects boundaries. What you practice is obsession." Marcus's attention shifted to Dante. "Who the hell are you? Her new boyfriend? I'm the person who's going to explain your options." Dante moved forward with that predatory grace I'd seen in the restaurant. "Option 1. You leave Chicago tonight. You delete Sophie's contact information from every device you own. You never call, text, email, or attempt to contact her again through any means. You tell no one where she is or how to find her. And you spend the rest of your life grateful that you're still breathing. You can't threaten me. I'll go to the police. Option 2, Dante continued as if Marcus hadn't spoken. You continue your current behavior. You keep harassing Sophie. You keep finding ways to contact her despite restraining orders and blocked numbers. You keep convincing yourself that your obsession justifies any action. He paused, letting silence build. And I make sure you physically cannot continue. Permanently. The threat hung in the air, unambiguous and terrifying. Marcus's face went pale, then red, cycling through emotions too quickly to track. You can't do this, he said, voice shaking now. This is kidnapping. Assault. I have rights. You had rights until you started violating someone else's. Dante crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with Marcus. Here's what you don't understand about the world, Marcus. Legal systems exist for people who operate within normal boundaries. For people who accept that no means no, that court orders have meaning, that women aren't property to be pursued until you wear them down. He stood, brushing invisible dust from his pants. But you've proven you don't operate within those boundaries. You've proven that restraining orders mean nothing to you, that police warnings are just obstacles to work around, that Sophie's fear and trauma are less important than your conviction that she belongs to you. I never hurt her, Marcus protested. I never laid a hand on her. All I did was try to communicate, try to fix our relationship. You terrorized her. My voice surprised me, sharp and clear. You made me afraid to leave my apartment, afraid to answer my phone, afraid to exist in public spaces because you always found me. You isolated me from everyone I cared about, then acted wounded when I finally had the strength to leave. Marcus's eyes found mine, and for a moment, I saw him, really saw him, not the charming man I'd fallen for 3 years ago, but the person he'd become, desperate, obsessive, so convinced of his own narrative that reality couldn't penetrate. Sophie, please. I can change. I'll give you space. I'll go to therapy. Just don't. His voice broke. Don't choose him over me. Don't throw away 3 years because some criminal in an expensive hassiness. Suit made you promises he can't keep. This isn't about choosing anyone, I said quietly. This is about choosing myself. About choosing safety and boundaries in a life where I'm not constantly afraid. I'll make you afraid. The words came out before Marcus could stop them, desperation morphing into rage. If I can't have you, if you really think you can just walk away from 3 years and start over with someone else, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. I'll make sure Marco's hand clamped over Marcus's mouth, cutting off the threats. But the damage was done. He'd revealed what we all already knew, that given the choice between accepting rejection and escalating his obsession, Marcus would always choose escalation. Dante's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. Decision made, consequences sealed. Take him to the holding room, Dante said to Marco. Let him think about his choices for a few hours. Then we'll revisit his options. As Marco hauled Marcus from the chair, still zip-tied, still making muffled noises of protest, I felt something break loose in my chest. Not relief, not yet, but the beginning of understanding that this might actually end, that Marcus's power over me was finally meeting something stronger. When we were alone in the warehouse, just Dante and me, and the echo of Marcus's fading protests, I turned to face him. What happens now? I asked. In the holding room. What are you going to do to him? I'm going to give him time to understand the gravity of his situation, to realize that his obsession has led him somewhere he can't escape from through charm or manipulation or threats. Dante's voice was carefully neutral. And then I'm going to give him one final chance to choose option 1. And if he doesn't, then I handle it in a way that ensures he never threatens you again. He moved closer, hands coming to rest on my shoulders. Sophie, I need you to be very clear about what you're asking me to do. If Marcus won't leave voluntarily, if he continues to be a threat, I will eliminate that threat, permanently. Do you understand what that means? I understood. He was asking if I could live with Marcus's blood on my hands, even if Dante was the one who spilled it. He was asking if my need for safety outweighed whatever moral objections I might have to violence done in my name. I thought about Isabella, about how she'd tried to leave 5 times and died on the 6th attempt, about all the other women who'd been killed by men who couldn't accept rejection, about the fact that the legal system, with all its restraining orders and court dates and police reports, hadn't stopped a single one of those tragedies. I understand, I said, "and I'm not asking you to kill him. But I am asking you to do whatever it takes to make sure I'm safe. Whatever that looks like." Something shifted in Dante's expression, respect, maybe, or recognition of the impossible choice I was making. "Then trust me to handle this. And know that whatever happens, you're under my protection now. That means something in this city. It means Marcus's obsession ends tonight, one way or another." He was right. I could feel it in the way my shoulders finally relaxed, the way breathing became easier. This nightmare that had consumed 8 months of my life was ending. Not through courts or police or hopeful thinking, but through the brutal efficiency of a man who understood that sometimes justice existed outside legal boundaries. "Thank you," I whispered. Dante pulled me close, and I let myself lean into his strength, let myself feel protected in a way I'd never experienced with Marcus, whose version of protection had always been about control. This was different. This was someone powerful enough to keep me safe without demanding I make myself smaller. We stayed like that for a long moment, his arms around me, my face pressed against his chest where I could hear the steady beat of his heart. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the spell. He pulled it out, read something, and his expression hardened. "We need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" Marcus didn't come alone to Chicago. Dante was already moving, pulling me toward the exit where our car waited. "He has a friend from San Diego who's been helping him track you. And that friend just showed up at my primary residence looking for you." Ice flooded my veins. "How would he know?" "The hostess from Luciano's. Before we shut her down, she must have given Marcus more information than just your phone number." He opened the car door, practically pushing me inside. "We need to get to Gabriella." "Your niece? Why would—" "Because she's at my residence this weekend, visiting from Boston." His voice was tight with controlled fury. "And if Marcus's friend is there looking for you, she might get caught in the crossfire." The car peeled out of the loading dock, Marco driving with the kind of aggressive skill that suggested military training. Dante was already on his phone, speaking rapid Italian to someone, issuing orders that I couldn't understand but felt the urgency of. "How far is your place?" I asked. 20 minutes in traffic. 10 if Marco breaks enough laws." Marco clearly chose option 2, weaving through Chicago streets with terrifying precision. I gripped the door handle, watching the city blur past, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. A 15-year-old girl caught between my stalker and Dante's world, someone innocent paying the price for my attempt to escape. "This is my fault," I said. "If I hadn't accepted your help, if I just handled this myself, if you'd handled it yourself, you'd be dead or disappeared within a month." Dante's voice was flat, certain. Marcus wasn't going to stop. You know that. And now his escalation has brought him into territory where he can be dealt with permanently. We screeched to a stop outside Dante's warehouse building. Security. Guards I hadn't noticed before materialized from shadows, weapons drawn but lowered. One of them approached Dante's window, speaking in low tones. "Situation contained," the guard said. "Male suspect. Late 20s. Armed with a knife. Attempted to breach the secondary entrance. Miss Moretti is secure in the panic room." Relief flooded through me so intensely my vision swam. Gabriella was safe. Whatever Marcus's friend had attempted, Dante's security had stopped it before it became a tragedy. "The suspect?" Dante asked. "Subdued and secured, waiting for your instructions." Dante glanced at me, and I understood the question in his eyes. We now had 2 of Marcus's allies, Marcus himself in the warehouse holding room, and this friend who'd come to Dante's home armed and dangerous. 2 problems that needed permanent solutions. "Handle both situations tonight," Dante said to the guard. "Make it clear that anyone who threatens what's mine will face consequences that end their ability to threaten anyone ever again." The guard nodded and disappeared back into the shadows. Dante led me inside, through security checkpoints that would have been invisible to casual observers, up an elevator that required biometric scanning to operate. We found Gabriella in the panic room, a space I hadn't known existed, hidden behind a false wall in Dante's master suite. She was curled on a leather sofa, headphones in, doing homework like she hadn't just been targeted by a stalker's accomplice. "Uncle Dante!" She pulled out her headphones, her face lighting up. She had her mother's features, I realized with a pang. Dark hair, delicate bone structure, eyes that held intelligence beyond her years. "Your security guy said there was some kind of situation. What happened?" "Just a misunderstanding with a delivery person." Dante's voice transformed, becoming warmer, gentler, the dangerous crime boss disappearing behind the mask of protective uncle. Nothing to worry about, but I need you to stay here for a few more hours while we make sure everything is sorted out, okay? Okay. She studied me with open curiosity. Who's this? This is Sophie. She works at one of my restaurants. The ease of the lie. The casual way he folded me into his legitimate life. Sophie, my niece Gabriella. Nice to meet you. I managed, hyper-aware that this teenager had nearly been hurt because of my connection to Dante. Because Marcus's obsession had spread like poison, contaminating everything it touched. We left her in the panic room with promises to return soon, the door sealing behind us with the quiet finality of a vault. In the hallway, Dante's careful composure finally cracked. He brought this to my home, he said, voice low and dangerous. Threatened my niece, crossed every line that exists in my world. He turned to face me fully. Marcus and his friend made their choice tonight. Now I make mine. What are you going to do? What I should have done the moment I realized Marcus wouldn't stop voluntarily. He pulled out his phone, typed something, then pocketed it. I'm eliminating the threat, completely, permanently, in a way that ensures no one else will ever think targeting you is an acceptable risk. The certainty in his voice should have terrified me, should have made me protest that there had to be another way, that violence only bred more violence. But I was so tired of being afraid, so tired of men who thought my fear was less important than their desires. Okay, I said, do what you need to do. Something shifted in Dante's expression, not quite satisfaction, but recognition. Like I'd finally understood the rules of his world and accepted my place in it. Come, he said, taking my hand. Let's get you somewhere safe while this is handled. And Sophie, after tonight, you'll never have to be afraid of Marcus again. That's a promise. As we left his residence, I caught a glimpse of security guards moving with purpose, of vehicles arriving in the alley, of the machinery of Dante's world activating to solve a problem that the legal system couldn't touch. I should have felt guilty, should have felt horror at what was about to happen in my name. Instead, I felt something close to peace. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of quiet conversations and careful silences. Dante took me to a hotel, not one of his properties, just a nice room in a generic chain where no one would think to look for us. Marco stood guard outside while Dante made phone calls in Italian, his voice carrying that same controlled authority I'd heard in the warehouse. I didn't ask questions, didn't demand details. Some part of me understood that knowing exactly what happened to Marcus would make me complicit in ways I wasn't ready to process. Better to exist in the comfortable ambiguity of not knowing, of being able to tell myself that Marcus had simply left Chicago and would never bother me again. But around 3 a.m., Dante emerged from the bathroom where he'd been taking yet another call, and something in his expression told me it was done. Marcus, I asked quietly, has accepted option 1. He left Chicago an hour ago, heading back to San Diego. He's been made to understand that any future contact with you, any attempt to find you, any violation of the terms we discussed, will result in consequences he won't survive. The careful phrasing, the way he didn't quite meet my eyes. I understood what he wasn't saying, that Marcus hadn't left voluntarily, that accepting option 1 had involved persuasion that fell well outside legal boundaries. And his friend has come to a similar understanding about the costs of involving himself in other people's problems. Dante sat beside me on the hotel bed, close enough that I could feel his warmth. You're safe now, Sophie. Actually safe, not just legal system safe. Do you understand the difference? I did. Actually safe. Not restraining order safe, but genuinely untouchable. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet. His voice carried an edge I couldn't identify, because now we need to discuss what happens next. What your life looks like after tonight. I turned to face him fully, seeing exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, seeing something deeper that might have been concern or guilt, or both. What do you mean? I mean that you're not just some waitress I helped anymore. You're someone who's been seen in my company, protected by my resources, living in my spaces. People in my world will make assumptions about what you mean to me, about our relationship. What kind of assumptions? That you're under my protection permanently, that hurting you means answering to me, that you're... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. That you're mine, in whatever capacity that implies. The possessive language should have sent alarm bells ringing, should have reminded me of Marcus and his obsession with ownership. But Dante's version felt different, not about controlling me, but about extending his protection to cover every aspect of my life. And if I don't want to be anyone's? I asked, testing boundaries. Then you're free to leave. Go back to your apartment, your job at Luciano's, your life as it was before last night. He met my eyes directly. But understand that leaving my protection means exactly that you're on your own. If new threats emerge, if Marcus finds his courage again, if any of this comes back, I won't be there to stop it. The choice he was offering wasn't really a choice at all. Return to the precarious safety of living alone, constantly vigilant, always waiting for Marcus to violate another boundary. Or accept Dante's protection and everything that came with it, the luxury, the danger, the complicated morality of his world. What would being yours actually mean? I asked. In practical terms, it means you move into one of my properties. Not the safe house, not a temporary situation. Actual residence with security and staff and everything necessary to ensure your safety. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked Chicago's sleeping streets. It means your life becomes intertwined with mine. You attend events when necessary, maintain the appearance of someone under my protection. You have access to resources and privileges that come with that association. And in return, you're safe. Completely. Actually safe in ways that don't depend on court orders or police response times. He turned back to face me. And you accept that my world operates by different rules. That sometimes I'll make decisions you don't understand or agree with. That protection comes with complications. I thought about my apartment with its broken security door. About Luciano's, where I'd waitressed for minimum wage plus tips while hiding from a stalker. About the life I'd been building in Chicago's small, careful, constantly looking over my shoulder. And I thought about the past 24 hours. About feeling truly safe for the first time in 8 months. About Dante's controlled power and the way he'd neutralized threats the legal system couldn't touch. About his sister Isabella, and how he'd sworn never to be powerless again. I accept, I said. Whatever complications come with your protection, whatever assumptions people make about us, I accept it. Dante crossed the distance between us in 3 strides, his hands cupping my face with surprising gentleness. You understand what you're agreeing to? That once you're part of my world, leaving becomes complicated in ways you can't predict? I understand that I trust you more than I trust the legal system to keep me safe. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. He kissed me then, and it was nothing like the careful restraint I'd expected. This was hunger and relief, and the culmination of tension that had been building since that first night at Luciano's. I kissed him back, pouring 8 months of fear and loneliness and desperate hope into the connection. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. This changes everything, he said quietly. I know. You'll have to meet people, important people in my organization. They'll judge you, test you, try to determine if you're a liability or an asset. Then I'll prove I'm an asset. His smile was sharp and genuine. I believe you will. 3 months later, I stood in front of the mirror in Dante's warehouse apartment, no longer a guest, but a resident adjusting the dress he'd had delivered for tonight's dinner. Black silk that hit just above my knees, elegant without being flashy, expensive in that subtle way that whispered rather than shouted. You look beautiful, Dante said from the doorway, already dressed in his usual dark suit, though you'd look beautiful in anything. I turned to face him, still not quite used to this version of my life. The luxury, the security, the way heads turned when we entered. Restaurants, not because people recognized me, but because they recognized Dante and wondered what I meant to him. Nervous? He asked, moving closer. About meeting your business associates? Terrified? Don't be. You've already proven you're stronger than half the men who work for me. His hand settled on my waist, familiar and possessive in ways I'd learned to crave. Just be yourself. Observe, listen, and if anyone makes you uncomfortable, signal me and I'll handle it. The dinner was at Luciano's, where I'd once waitressed and now entered as Dante's companion. Maria did a double take when she saw us, her eyes widening as she took in my transformation from coworker to whatever I was now. Sophie, she hugged me during a quiet moment. Oh my God, look at you. I heard rumors, but I didn't believe. Believe them, I said softly. It's complicated, but I'm safe. Actually safe. And happy? Her eyes searched my face. I thought about the past 3 months, about waking up in Dante's bed without immediately checking my phone for threatening messages, about moving through the city without constantly looking over my shoulder, about the way Dante touched me, protected me, treated me like someone valuable rather than someone to be controlled. Yes, I said, surprised by how true it was. Actually happy. The dinner introduced me to Dante's world in ways I'd only glimpsed before. Business associates who operated legitimate enterprises alongside less legitimate ones. Politicians who looked the other way in exchange for campaign contributions. Other families who'd reached agreements about territory and operations, maintaining peace through careful balance of power. And through it all, Dante kept me close. His hand on the small of my back, his body angled to include me in conversations, his occasional glances checking that I was comfortable. Not controlling like Marcus had been, but attentive. Protective. "She's lovely," one of the older men said to Dante in Italian, not realizing I'd been taking lessons for the past month. "But is she strong enough for your world?" "Stronger than she knows," Dante replied in the same language. She survived 8 months being hunted by an obsessive ex-boyfriend, relocated across the country alone, and faced her stalker without breaking. Strength isn't always loud. The validation made my chest tight with emotion I wasn't ready to name. Later, back at the warehouse apartment, I found Dante on the rooftop terrace where I'd first explored 3 months ago. He stood at the railing, looking out over the city, lost in thoughts I couldn't read. "You defended me tonight," I said, joining him. "To that man who questioned if I belonged in your world. I stated facts." He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me from behind. "You do belong here, Sophie, more than most of the people who were born into this life. Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly. "The choices you've made, the things you've done." "I regret that the world is built in ways that make my choices necessary, but I don't regret protecting the people who matter to me." His voice carried that familiar certainty. "I don't regret what happened to Marcus, if that's what you're asking." I hadn't asked about Marcus in 3 months, hadn't searched his name online or tried to contact mutual friends to find out what happened. Existing in the comfortable ambiguity of not knowing had been easier than confronting the reality of what Dante had done in my name. "Is he alive?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Dante was quiet for a long moment. "Yes. Living in San Diego, working a job his friend helped him get, seeing a therapist twice a week. He believes that if he ever contacts you again, if he even thinks about you too hard, consequences will find him." And he's right. Relief and guilt warred in my chest. Marcus was alive, getting help, living his life far from mine, but that outcome had required threats and violence, and the kind of fear that the legal system couldn't create. "Thank you," I whispered, "for not making me choose between my safety and someone's death. I don't make unnecessary casualties." His arms tightened around me. "But I need you to understand, if Marcus had forced the choice, if keeping you safe had required more permanent measures, I would have taken them without hesitation." I knew. I'd always known. That was part of accepting Dante's protection, accepting that he would do whatever was necessary, that his moral calculations weighted my safety above almost anything else. "I love you," I said, the words surprising me even as I spoke them. "I know it's complicated. I know your world is dangerous. I know there are 1,000 reasons this shouldn't work, but I love you." Dante turned me to face him, his dark eyes searching my face in the soft light from the city below. "I've loved you since that first night at Luciano's, when you stood there terrified but trying to maintain your composure, when you warned me that your stalker was waiting outside, when you trusted me enough to get in Marco's car despite every reason not to." He kissed me then, and Chicago glittered around us like we were the only 2 people in the world. Like the past 8 months of nightmare had led us exactly here, to this moment, to this impossible love built on violence and protection, and the understanding that sometimes justice existed outside courtrooms. "So what happens now?" I asked when we finally broke apart. The question that had become our refrain, asked and answered a dozen different ways. "Now?" Dante smiled, sharp and genuine and full of dark promise. "Now we live. We build something real in the spaces between the danger. We prove that love doesn't have to look like fairy tales to be worth everything. Together, always together." And standing there on his rooftop terrace, wrapped in the arms of a man who'd burned down my nightmare and built sanctuary in its place, I finally understood what safety felt like. Not the precarious, maybe protection of restraining orders and police reports, but the absolute certainty that someone powerful enough to keep me safe had chosen to do exactly that. The city sprawled below us, massive and indifferent and full of threats I no longer had to face alone. Somewhere in San Diego, Marcus was learning to live with the consequences of his choices. Somewhere in this building, security systems monitored every entrance and exit. Somewhere in the complicated machinery of Dante's world, protection wrapped around me like armor I'd never have to remove. "I love you," I said again, needing him to hear it, needing to claim this impossible thing we'd built. "I love you," he replied, dark and certain and absolute, and anyone who threatens what's mine will learn exactly what that means. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better real, complicated, built on a foundation of survived trauma and the understanding that sometimes the person who saves you operates outside the rules you'd been taught to follow. And as Dante led me back inside, his hand warm and solid in mine, I realized I wouldn't change any of it. Not the fear that had brought us together, not the violence that had made me safe, not the complicated morality of accepting protection from someone whose world operated by different rules. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly, completely safe, and that was worth everything. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.